Howdy doody, my name is Cameron, better known as Venus Theory. My studio behind me is an absolute mess, so we'll just ignore that because the only thing that matters is today we get to talk about Orchestral Suite 2 from my friends at UVI. As I'm sure you can imagine, there's a lot to cover in this, so let's just get into all that. Orchestral Suite 2 is a complete symphonic orchestra library from UVI, covering solo instruments, ensembles, and combined instruments with the new Composer engine, with the entire library being redesigned from the ground up with a brand new interface. With instrument-specific controls, a range of articulations, and expressive, realistic performances all captured with uncompromising attention to detail, this library is a comprehensive symphonic orchestra ready to add that iconic orchestral sound to your productions, whether you're just getting started or looking to expand your composing toolkit. Getting started, let's take a look at the layout for solo instruments inside of Orchestral Suite 2. On the Instrument tab here, you'll find all the available articulations which can be selected manually by clicking them or with the key switches in the lower octave range here. So we've got things like sustains, we've got tremolo, softer consordino, the pizzicato, because everybody needs that, and even some trills on some instruments, like major or minor, for those darker, moodier moments. Below that, you'll find the voicing section. Here we have a couple different modes for polyphonic, legato, and portamento, with a controllable time and an on pedal toggle here, which will only add legato when you press the sustain pedal. Next to that, you'll find the mic mixer section. So here we have omni, cardioid, stereo, and the release sample volume. So if we get rid of that and maybe bring in only the omni mic, we can get a different sound to the solo instrument. We could bring in some of the cardio, or go for a wider stereo feel with the stereo mics. We can bring up the release samples, and as I release the key, you'll hear what happens. And of course, you can blend any of these together in any way you see fit to customize for a more close, intimate sound, or a wider sound with just a little bit of that direct signal. Along the bottom here, you'll find a set of macros for things like the color, dynamic response, the balance, which will bias the sound towards the lower or higher strings depending on which direction you've set it in, the true range toggle here, which restricts the key range to the natural range of an instrument. Of course, you can disable this to get the expanded range to experiment and get a bit weird with things. Then we have the reverb and delay. Over in the timbre tab, we have a couple more controls, the gain for the instrument, panning, and pitch. We also have the ADSR and the two assignable LFOs, which can be assigned anywhere you see the modulation icon on the interface, like the gain knob here. Over in the effects section, we have the reverb, delay, EQ, and maximizer, all with their respective controls below. And then last up, we have the settings. Here we can set the MIDI mode. Right now I have this assigned to the mod wheel, so as I move the mod wheel, I can change the dynamics of the instrument. Otherwise, you can set this to velocity, so softer velocity and louder velocity. Next to that is the smoothing filter, which adds a gentle filter just to smooth out the overall dynamic response. This can be handy to adjust in a higher value if you want a softer sound and you're doing something with the mod wheel. Then we have the polyphony settings, pitch bend range, and the MIDI curve. That's really it for all the basics, so let's take a look at a couple of the other solo instruments just to see how the interface differs. Looking at a percussion instrument here, the taiko, we have the instrument tab, which changes a little bit. All the macros remain the same. So here we have a doubling section. We could add some pitch doubling, maybe a little bit of filtering and offset the time. Get us a nice big ensemble sound. Other than that, the timbre and effects tabs are the same as are the settings. So that's basically how the interfaces will look as you transition between instruments. Similarly here, jumping over to a harp, we can see that the instrument tab changes once again to offer a variety of articulations while everything else remains the same. So we've got the harp sustains. We can go for a closer sound in the sustains. We have some glissandos and cascade, which I think sounds beautiful in this library if you just hold out a big chord. Just a very fun noise. Of course, you'll have just about everything else you could possibly need included in the library with things like pitched percussions, woodwinds, cymbals, alto flutes, bass clarinet, and beyond, so that all your standard and more exotic colors and combinations are available. In case all this wasn't already enough, it is worth quickly mentioning that all of the legacy recordings from Orchestral Suite 1 are also available inside of Orchestral Suite 2 with the newly designed interface, meaning you can layer them together and get all your favorite patches from the original and combine them with all the new stuff in Orchestral Suite 2. I think this is actually nice because you can then layer the two different orchestras together in your compositions, because each of them has their own kind of set of herbs and spices with the way they were recorded and really thicken things out. Anyways though, let's move on and talk a little bit about the ensembles. So here we have the high strings ensemble. As before, you'll see we have a set of articulations, voicing modes, and the macros down along the bottom. The remainder of the instrument controls in the timbre, effects, and settings sections all remain the same, which means that navigating Orchestral Suite 2 is actually pretty straightforward, since the only major changes are in the instrument tab, and with most instruments sharing a pretty similar set of articulations, there's not really a whole lot to learn once you get your bearings, and then it's pretty quick to work with. Moving over to something else like the choir here, you'll see that everything else repeats. So realistically, no matter what you're working with inside of Orchestral Suite 2, it's almost entirely frictionless to jump between different parts of the orchestra and start writing for the individual layers. Speaking of layers though, let's take a look at the new Composer engine, which is probably the biggest update within Orchestral Suite 2. As with most things in music, writing orchestral music is pretty easy. Writing good orchestral music is very, very hard, and one of the hardest things about it is what's similar to what's hard about making these videos, in that, what am I supposed to be doing with my hands? Orchestras are really big, and there's a lot of complicated moving parts and nuances in the way that you arrange things to get it all to fit together, and you really have to think about every individual layer on a moment-to-moment basis in both its voicing and the articulation that that instrument or performer is using, and that's where the new Composer engine comes into play here. The Composer engine offers up to 5 sectional layers with 8 chord slots and fully orchestrated voicings available by pressing just a single key, making sketching out varying orchestral color patches incredibly efficient. Orchestral color is a huge concept, and without getting too into the weeds on all of it here, basically it's just the way you combine different sounds and instruments to create a certain mood to things. And I know I hate producer terminology as much as the next person, but that's the fastest way I can think to summarize something that would easily be a series of videos in its own right. With the Composer engine, we get a big selection of different orchestral combinations with preset chord voicings that utilize the range of available parts and give you a much more polished sound than just copying and pasting MIDI between parts. For beginners, I think this is actually a fantastic tool to start sketching ideas quickly, obviously, but also just learn about voicing different things for different orchestral combinations. Taking a look at this patch here, we have some choirs, and we can see the difference in the voicing between this C7 sus2 and something like the F minor 7 to best utilize the range of the available ensembles and instruments. In this case, it's all choirs, so if we move over to something else, maybe in the cinematic section, we have a bunch of different stuff going on here, and we can see how these are voiced to utilize more of that range provided by the different instruments. For the more seasoned among you, I do think that this is also a useful tool just to quickly sketch something together, especially if you're on a deadline, and just get some ideas for voicings and colors that you could use, and then break these out into individual layers within your composition by breaking out the individual sections into their own tracks. Breaking this down, on the main tab here, we can select a Composer preset, which includes both orchestral layers and a chord progression. If you want to change the predefined chords, you can do this with the chord preset menu here, as well as change the key and octave. With each of the chord pads, you can also input your own chords by clicking any of these and then selecting the record button here and entering up to 5 notes. I'm just going to put in a cool E major voicing that I like. And now we've got that assigned to this first chord pad. And you can also quickly change the octave of individual chords with the plus and minus buttons here. Moving over to the Edit tab here, we can adjust the mix of each layer. You can select different layers by clicking a layer and going through the menu. We have the global amp ADSR, and on the bottom we have the macros, which are on the main page as well, for color, dynamic, reverb, and delay. In the effects section, you'll find the reverb, delay, and equalizer with their respective controls. And finally, in the settings, we once again have the MIDI mode with the smoothing filter control. This new engine is really fun, and I think you can lose hours just exploring different combinations and ideas, and I think it is a good way to work by having designed ensembles just kind of backing your basic sketches and then breaking those out into individual layers and starting to work with them within your compositions. As I'm sure you've guessed, realistically, there is no way for me to cover everything that's included in this library in a reasonable amount of time, so I think the best way to go about this is just to run through a few different Composer engine presets so you can hear a little bit of everything to get a sense of how Orchestral Suite 2 feels and sounds in action. Orchestral Suite 2 is available now, either as a standalone product or as part of UVI's Sonic Pass. If you want to check it out for yourself or find more information, you can do so at the links down in the description below. And that's pretty much it. So thanks to the UVI team for having me on the channel as always, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And of course, as always, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.